My mother pointed at me in court and said, "She tricked him. She knew he wasn't in his right mind. He saw the last name and thought she was me." A few people in the gallery gasped. Not because courtrooms are dramatic, because she said it like she had rehearsed it. My lawyer grabbed my arm under the table. "Say something," he whispered. I didn't. I kept my eyes on the judge and let my mother keep talking. Because if there is one thing I learned growing up with her, it was this. When she thinks she owns the room, she always says too much. That morning she had come into the courthouse wearing navy, structured jacket, pearls, a widow's expression she had been practicing since my grandfather died. From the hallway, you would have thought she was there to protect his memory, not erase me from it. She turned toward the judge again. She wasn't even raised as his real granddaughter, she said. She was adopted, and after 18 she lived her own life. She only came back when there was money. My lawyer tightened his grip once. Not hard, just enough to say, "This is getting dangerous." I stayed still, because dangerous was fine. Dangerous meant she was moving too fast. The judge looked down at the file, then back up at her. My mother mistook that silence for sympathy. She always did. That was her biggest weakness. She believed composure looked like innocence. It doesn't. Sometimes it just looks expensive. I sat there in my gray suit with my hands folded neatly on the table and watched her build the story she wished were true. A fraudulent granddaughter, a confused old man, a manipulated will, an adopted girl who had overreached. It was a good story, clean, moral. The kind people like because it gives greed a respectable shape. The only problem was that it wasn't what happened. 2 years earlier, my grandfather started forgetting where he put his glasses, then his car keys, then whether he had taken his blood pressure medication. Nothing dramatic, nothing cinematic. Just the slow, ordinary unraveling that comes with age and frightens families for different reasons. Some people get scared because they love you. My mother got organized. That should have warned me earlier than it did. She started talking about next steps. Power of attorney, medication schedules, checking accounts, documents. She didn't cry much when his memory slipped. She made lists. That was more her style. We lived 40 minutes apart then. I had just turned 24. Worked weekdays in the financial aid office at a community college, and picked up extra hours helping students with appeal forms because half of them were one bad semester away from dropping out, and nobody in administration seemed to understand what panic looks like when it's wearing a hoodie. My life wasn't glamorous, it was stable. That had always been my role. Stable enough to be useful, never important enough to be centered. I was adopted when I was 6. My earliest memory of my grandfather was his knees, not his face. His knees in corduroy pants, because that was my eye level when he bent down and said, "Well, there you are. No hesitation, no overcompensation. Just that." As if I had been expected all along. That mattered more than I understood at the time. Because my mother had a talent for making every belonging feel conditional, not loudly, not in ways anyone could quote back to her. Just in the 1,000 tiny calibrations that teach a child what she is allowed to assume. My mother liked to tell people I was chosen. That sounds generous until you hear the way some women say it. With ownership, with interest, with implied debt. If I did well in school, she told church friends adoption agencies were very strict, and she had been wise to see potential. If I disappointed her, she reminded me gently that blood would have been easier. Not better, just easier. That was enough. People imagine cruelty as heat, yelling, doors, broken things. But in middle-class American families, especially the respectable ones, cruelty often wears cardigans and carries casseroles. It comes in the form of comparisons. Your cousin is so grounded. Your brother doesn't make everything complicated. Your grandfather always wanted family around. That last one was my mother's favorite when he got older. Family around, meaning her, not me. At least not until his decline became inconvenient. Then suddenly my schedule mattered. My flexibility mattered. My patience mattered. "Could you stop by on Thursday?" she asked one evening while I was still at work. "I have to meet with the attorney." There was always an attorney by then. An elder care attorney. An estate attorney. A tax attorney. My grandfather's life had become a series of legal folders before it had become a grief. "Sure," I said. "You know he does better with you," she added. That was the first honest thing she'd said in months. He did do better with me. He relaxed when I came in, he ate more, he talked more. He let me help him without turning it into a performance of decline. Sometimes we sat in his den and watched old baseball games, and he would ask me the same question twice in 20 minutes. I didn't correct him the second time. That seemed cruel. Other days he was sharper than anyone expected. He remembered the names of my high school teachers, the details of a scholarship I had almost gotten, the red coat I wore one Christmas when I was 9 and refused to take off indoors because I thought it made me look like someone in a story. Memory is not a straight line. That was the thing my mother either didn't understand or didn't want to. She kept talking about him like he had vanished before he actually had. That is a kind of theft, too. Now, the first time I realized money was involved, we were in his kitchen. He was cutting an apple badly, too close to his fingers. I took the knife gently and finished it for him. He sat down and watched me. Not confused, just tired. "I saw your mother with the lawyer again," he said. I kept my tone light. "She likes meetings." He gave a small sound that might have been a laugh. Then he looked at me for a long second. "You're still planning on school?" he asked. I wiped the knife. "Maybe," I said. I had said maybe for years by then because maybe sounds less expensive than yes. He nodded slowly. "You should go," he said. I leaned against the sink. "It's not that simple." He looked almost offended. "It is if I decide it is." That was him. Even declining, he still had flashes of the man who had built a business from nothing and refused to romanticize struggle. I smiled. "You can't just decide things for me." He took the plate from me. "No," he said. "But I can stop other people from deciding against you." I didn't know what he meant then. Not exactly. But I remember the way he said it. Clear, present. Like a man who knew precisely where his mind was. That mattered later. That mattered more than anything my mother would say in court. Back in the courtroom, she was still speaking, still spinning, still trusting the momentum of her own voice. It was undue influence, she said. She spent weeks with him alone. He was confused. He thought he was signing something for family. My lawyer leaned closer. "She's overplaying it," he murmured. I kept my eyes forward. "I know." The judge lifted one hand. My mother stopped mid-breath. And in that tiny silence I felt the first real shift of the day. Not victory, not yet. Just the room beginning to ask itself whether it had heard too much. The judge didn't look at me. He looked at her. That was the shift. Small, but decisive. "Counsel," he said without raising his voice, "let's be precise." My mother's attorney stood, straightened his jacket, nodded once. "Of course, Your Honor." The judge tapped the file lightly. "Your claim is undue influence," he said. "Yes, and lack of capacity at the time of execution." "Yes, Your Honor." He paused. Then, "What evidence do you have that the decedent did not understand the nature of the document he signed?" A clean question, no room for narrative. Only proof. My mother moved before her attorney could answer. He was forgetting things, she said. He didn't recognize people sometimes. He was confused. The judge lifted his hand again. "Ma'am, I'm asking for evidence," he said. Not unkind, not indulgent, just limiting. Her attorney stepped in. "We have testimony regarding his declining memory," he said. "Witness accounts." The judge nodded once. "Medical records," though a pause. "Not formal diagnoses, Your Honor." Another pause. "Any evaluation of capacity conducted near the date of execution?" The attorney hesitated. "No formal evaluation, no." That landed. Not loudly, but clearly. I kept my hands folded, didn't look at my lawyer, didn't look at her. I had learned that looking at the wrong person at the wrong time can make you seem reactive. And reactive is easy to dismiss. My mother shifted slightly in her seat, not enough for anyone else to notice. But I did. Because I had spent a lifetime tracking those small movements, the tightening around her mouth, the way her shoulders squared when something wasn't going as planned. She wasn't used to being questioned this way. At home, she controlled the questions. "He trusted her," she said suddenly. Meaning me, he trusted her completely. It sounded like a compliment. It wasn't. The judge looked at her again. "That in itself is not undue influence," he said. Silence. Dina, my lawyer, exhaled slowly beside me, almost inaudible. Then the judge flipped a page. "Let's talk about the execution of the trust," he said. "Who was present?" My mother's attorney answered this time. "The decedent, the defendant." He gestured lightly toward me. "And an attorney," named the judge asked. "David Klein." The judge nodded. "Licensed in this state?" "Yes, Your Honor." "Good standing?" "Yes." Another pause. "Was the document notarized?" "Yes." "Witnessed?" "Yes." Each answer narrowed the space. The judge leaned back slightly, then asked the question that mattered. "Was the execution recorded?" My mother's attorney blinked, just once. I didn't move. "No," he said carefully, "not to our knowledge." The judge looked down at the file again, then toward my side of the table. "Defense. My lawyer didn't rush. He never did. That was one of the reasons I trusted him." He adjusted his glasses. Then said, "Yes, Your Honor." The word didn't land like a reveal. It landed like a correction. My mother turned her head, slowly, toward me. For the first time that morning, she wasn't performing. She was calculating. The judge raised an eyebrow slightly. "You have a recording." "Yes. A complete recording of the execution," my lawyer said, "from introduction through signing." The room shifted. Not dramatically, no gasps, just attention. "Bye." My mother leaned toward her attorney, whispered something sharp. He shook his head once. Too late. The judge nodded. "I'll want to review that," he said. My lawyer inclined his head. "Of course." My mother spoke again, faster now. That doesn't prove anything she said. He could still have been confused. He could have thought the judge looked at her. And she stopped. That was new. Because she had always been able to talk over discomfort, to fill space, to reshape things in real time. Now the space wasn't hers. The judge turned back to my lawyer. "Anything else?" he asked. My lawyer glanced at me, just briefly. A check, not for permission, for alignment. I gave the smallest nod. He turned back. "Yes, Your Honor," he said. "We also have a statement from Mr. Klein regarding the decedent's capacity at the time of execution." My mother's shoulders tightened again. "Mr. Klein conducted a standard capacity assessment." My lawyer continued. "He asked the decedent to identify the nature of the document, the scope of his assets, and the beneficiaries." A pause. The decedent answered each question clearly and correctly. The judge made a note. "And the beneficiaries?" he asked. My lawyer didn't look at me this time. He didn't need to. "The decedent identified the defendant by name," he said, unprompted. Silence. Not heavy, not tense, just conclusive. I felt something in my chest loosen. Not relief, not yet. Just the release of pressure that had been building for years. My mother leaned back in her chair. For the first time, she didn't try to fill the silence, because there was nothing left to fill it with. But she wasn't finished. I knew that. She had one more argument. One she had been holding, saving, because it sounded stronger, cleaner, more legal. "She's not even his real granddaughter," she said. There it was. She was adopted, my mother continued, and after 18 she was independent. She wasn't part of the household anymore. She looked at the judge, steady again, rebuilding. So, whatever he intended for family, she added, doesn't automatically include her. My lawyer didn't interrupt. He let it sit. Because this time, it wasn't about facts. It was about law. And law doesn't bend for tone. The room didn't react to what she said. That was the difference between accusation and law. Accusations stir people. Law filters them. She was adopted, my mother repeated. Slower now, more deliberate. As an adult, she made her own life. She was no longer part of the family unit. She sat back, hands folded, expression controlled again. That look, the one she used when she believed she had found the cleanest argument. Or, my lawyer didn't move right away. He let the silence sit. Then he stood. Your Honor, he said, adoption in this state establishes full legal parent-child status. A pause. Indistinguishable from biological relation in matters of inheritance. The judge nodded slightly. Further, my lawyer continued, there is no legal requirement that a beneficiary reside with or remain financially dependent on a family to retain standing in a trust. He didn't look at my mother. He didn't need to. This trust does not condition inheritance on proximity, he said. It identifies a beneficiary by name. He let that settle. My client's legal status as a granddaughter is not affected by age, residence, or independence. My mother shifted again, subtle but tighter. She left, she said, not to the judge, to the room, to anyone still listening with emotion instead of structure. She chose her own life, she added. I almost answered that. Almost. But I didn't. Because this wasn't about leaving, it was about belonging. And those are not the same thing. The judge leaned forward slightly. Ma'am, he said the court is not evaluating family dynamics. A pause. We are evaluating the validity of a legal instrument. That closed the door. Not gently. Completely. My mother inhaled, held it, then released it slowly. She looked at her attorney. He gave the smallest shake of his head. Not here. Not anymore. My lawyer remained standing. Your Honor, he said, if I may, I would like to submit the recording. The judge nodded. Proceed. My lawyer turned, plugged a small device into the courtroom system. The screen flickered once, then steadied. And suddenly, we were back in my grandfather's dining room. The lighting was softer, natural. The table, the glass of water, the same one he hadn't finished. I felt it before I thought it. Memory, not sharp. Familiar. The video began without narration. Just the sound of chairs, paper, movement. My grandfather sat at the head of the table. Not confused. Not searching. Present. The attorney sat across from him, calm, professional. Mr. Lawson, he said, can you tell me what we're doing today? My grandfather looked at him, then at the papers. We're setting up the trust, he said. Make clear, even. And what does that trust do, the attorney asked. It distributes my assets, he replied. To whom the attorney asked. My grandfather didn't hesitate. My granddaughter, he said. A pause. Then Emma. My name. Not guessed, not prompted. Placed. The attorney nodded. And why have you chosen Emma? He asked. My grandfather leaned back slightly. Thought. Then said, because she showed up. Silence. Not courtroom silence. Different. Full. She didn't wait for me to ask, he added. She didn't ask what she would get. A pause. She just came. I felt my throat tighten. Not with sadness. Recognition. The attorney continued. Are you making this decision voluntarily? Yes. Has anyone pressured you to do this? No. Do you understand that this document will control how your assets are distributed? Yes. The video continued for several more minutes. Each answer steady, each response clear. No confusion. No hesitation. Just a man making a decision. When it ended, the courtroom didn't react immediately. Because some truths take a second longer to land. My lawyer unplugged the device, returned to his seat. The judge looked down, made a note. Then looked up again. "My counsel," he said to my mother's attorney, "do you have any evidence to contradict what we have just seen?" A pause. The attorney glanced at my mother. She didn't answer. Because for the first time, there was nothing she could say that wouldn't expose her. He turned back. "No, Your Honor." That was it. Not dramatic. Not loud. Final. And in that moment, for the first time in that room, I wasn't being defined. I was being recognized. The judge didn't announce a decision right away. That would have been too clean, too easy. He closed the file, sat back, looked at both tables. "Counsel," he said, "I'll take a brief recess before issuing findings." The gavel didn't come down. There was no formal break, just a shift. People stood, moved quietly. My lawyer leaned toward me. "You did exactly right," he said. I nodded once. Not because I needed reassurance, because I understood what had just happened. Across the aisle, my mother remained seated. That was unusual. She didn't retreat, didn't gather her things, didn't step into the hallway to regroup. She stayed, hands folded, eyes forward, holding position. That had always been her instinct. Stay, control the space. Even when the structure beneath it had already changed. Her attorney bent slightly toward her, spoke in a low voice. She shook her head. Once, sharp, not accepting the direction. He straightened, stepped back. For the first time that morning, she was alone in the room. Not physically, but structurally. I stood, walked toward the side hallway. The same hallway where people check their phones, adjust their expressions, and decide what version of events they will carry back into the world. My lawyer followed. "We're in a strong position," he said. I nodded. "I know." A pause. "They may try to pivot," he added. "To what?" He considered that. "Emotional appeal," he said. "Family reconciliation. Something that reframes intent." I almost smiled. "She already tried that," I said. He nodded. "Yes." And it didn't hold. We stood there for a moment. Not strategizing. Just settling. Because there's a point in every case where you stop building and start recognizing. When we returned to the courtroom, the room had changed. Not visibly. Same people, same seats, but the way they held themselves, different. Less certain. More attentive. My mother was still in her seat. But her posture had shifted, not collapsed. Recalibrated. She looked at me as I walked back. Really looked. Not as an extension of something she owned. As a variable she hadn't accounted for. That was new. The judge returned. Everyone stood, then sat. He opened the file again. "I've reviewed the testimony and the submitted evidence," he said. No rush, no emphasis. The court finds no credible evidence of undue influence. A pause. The recording demonstrates clear understanding and voluntary execution. Another pause. The decedent identified the beneficiary by name and provided a rational basis for that decision. I felt my hands relax in my lap. Not victory. Oh, completion. The judge continued. As to the argument regarding adoption and subsequent independence, he looked briefly toward my mother. That argument has no legal standing. Flat. No elaboration. No need. Adopted children are afforded the same rights as biological children under state law, he said. And there is no requirement of continued residence or dependence to maintain beneficiary status. He closed the file. The petition is denied. Silence. Not dramatic. Just definitive. My mother didn't react immediately. She sat there, as if the decision needed time to reach her. Her attorney leaned in. "We should discuss next steps," he said quietly. "Appeal. Settlement. Damage control." She didn't answer. Because this wasn't a negotiation anymore. It was an ending. People began to move. Papers gathered. Chairs shifted. The ordinary mechanics of closure. I stayed seated for a moment longer. Let the room empty around me. My lawyer touched my arm lightly. "We're done," he said. I nodded. Yes. When I stood, my mother was already on her feet. She didn't leave. She waited. Of course she did. Control doesn't disappear. It looks for a new form. "Emma," she said. Her voice was lower now. "Not for the room. For me." I turned. "Yes." A pause. Then, "You know that wasn't the whole story," she said. I looked at her. Not defensive, not angry. Just clear. "It was enough of it," I replied. She held my gaze. For a second, something almost honest moved across her face. Not regret. Something closer to recognition. Then it was gone. Replaced by the version of herself she knew how to carry. "This didn't have to go this way," she said. I considered that. Briefly. Then said, "It always was." She didn't answer. Because there was nothing left to reshape. Nothing left to reframe. Just the truth. And for once, it wasn't hers to control. We didn't walk out together. That would have suggested something was still shared. It wasn't. I stepped into the hallway first. The fluorescent lights felt harsher after the courtroom. Less forgiving. More honest. My phone buzzed once in my hand. A message from work. A student asking if I could review an appeal letter before the deadline. I stared at it for a second, then typed back, "Send it. I'll look tonight." Life doesn't pause for closure. It just waits to see if you'll return to it. My lawyer caught up beside me. "We'll get the written order in a few days," he said. I nodded. "If they appeal, it won't change much," he added. "I know." He hesitated. Then, "You handled that well." I almost smiled. "I didn't do anything I said." "You didn't interrupt," he replied. A pause. "That's not nothing." We reached the exit. Glass doors, late afternoon light. I pushed one open, stepped outside. The air felt different, not lighter, just uncontained. For a moment I stood there, let the sound of traffic settle around me. Then I walked. Not toward anything specific, just away from the building. My grandfather's house was still in my name, or technically in the trust, but I had the right to live there, to decide what happened next. I drove there without thinking. The driveway looked the same. Leaves gathered near the edges, mailbox slightly tilted. Small details that stay when bigger things shift. Inside the house held its usual quiet. Not empty, just still. I set my keys down in the same bowl he used, walked into the kitchen. The counter was clean, the chair at the table pushed in. No signs of interruption. Because nothing here had been interrupted. That was the part my mother never understood. She thought inheritance was about control, about possession. But this house, this space, it wasn't something he gave away. It was something he chose. I sat at the table, the same place where he signed the papers. Ran my hand lightly over the surface. No marks, no indication of what had happened there. Except memory. My phone buzzed again. This time her name. I didn't answer. Not immediately. It rang, stopped, then rang again. I let it. Because this time, I wasn't reacting. I was deciding. On the third call, I picked up. "Emma," she said. No greeting. Just my name. "Yes." A pause. "Then we need to talk." I looked at the table. "We did talk," I said. "That wasn't a conversation," she replied. I almost repeated her words from court. But I didn't. Because repetition keeps you in the same place. "This isn't about the case," she said. "It always is. Just not in the way people admit." "What is it about?" I asked. Another pause. "You made me look like I was trying to take something that wasn't mine," she said. I closed my eyes briefly. "You were," I said. Silence. Longer this time. "I was protecting what belongs to this family," she said. There it was. Not money, not documents. Ownership. "I am part of this family," I replied. "You chose not to be," she said quickly. I let that sit. Because that was the version she needed. Not true, but useful. "I chose not to stay where I wasn't respected," I said. Another pause. "That's not the same thing." She didn't respond. Because she didn't believe that distinction existed, or didn't want it to. "You embarrassed me," she said finally. Not angry. Wounded. Publicly. That mattered more to her than anything else. "I didn't mention you," I said. "That's not how it felt," she replied. Feelings again. Reshaping facts. I stood, walked slowly into the den. The chair where my grandfather used to sit was still there. I rested my hand on the back of it. "So, he knew what he was doing," I said. A pause. "I know," she said. That stopped me. I hadn't expected that. "You knew I asked." Another pause. "He always did what he wanted," she said. Not admiration. Resentment. And he chose you. There it was. Not confusion. Not misunderstanding. Choice. "I didn't take anything from you," I said. "No," she replied. "He gave it to you." A pause. "And that's the problem." I didn't answer. Because for the first time, she had said something completely true. I didn't argue with her after that. There wasn't anything left to correct. We stayed on the phone a few seconds longer, neither of us speaking. Then she said, "So what happens now? Not about the case, not about the money. About control." I leaned against the edge of the desk, looked at the window. Nothing I said. A pause. "That's not realistic," she replied. It was. She just didn't recognize it. "I'm not asking for anything," I said. "You already have everything," she said. I considered that. "No," I replied. "I have what he chose to give me." Silence. That difference mattered. Because taking implies conflict. Being given ends it. You could at least, she started. Then stopped. She didn't know what to ask for. An apology wouldn't fit. Control wasn't available. Rewriting the outcome wasn't possible. There was nothing left that made sense. "I have to go," I said. "Emma," I ended the call. Not abruptly. Just finished. That evening I stayed in the house. Not because I didn't have anywhere else to go. Because for the first time, it felt like mine without explanation. I opened the cabinets, checked the fridge, made something simple. Sat at the table, ate without distraction. No performance. No awareness of being observed. Just presence. Later I went through the study. Files, folders, old receipts. The kind of things people keep when they believe structure protects meaning. In the bottom drawer I found a small envelope. My name on the front. Not formal, not legal. Just written. I opened it. Inside was a single sheet. No letterhead, no signature. Just his handwriting. You won't need permission for the things that matter. I read it twice, then set it down. That was him. Not sentimental. Direct. The next week moved quietly. Work, calls, emails. Normal things. My lawyer sent the formal order. Clean, final. Case closed. He added a short note. They are unlikely to appeal. I wasn't surprised. Appeals require something to argue. There wasn't anything left. I heard about my mother through other people. Not directly. A woman from church mentioned she hadn't been attending. A neighbor said her car had been in the driveway all week. Small updates. Filtered. Distant. That was how information moved when it no longer belonged to you. 2 weeks later, she came to the house. I saw her through the window first, standing on the porch, not knocking yet, just deciding. I opened the door. She looked the same. Of course she did. My, people don't change in 2 weeks. Hi, she said. Hi. A pause. Can I come in? I stepped aside. She walked in slowly, looked around. Not like a visitor, like someone checking if something had shifted. It hadn't. She stopped in the kitchen, ran her hand lightly along the counter. He kept everything the same, she said. Yes. Another pause. I didn't think he would choose you, she said. No accusation. Just fact. I nodded. I know. She looked at me then. Directly. For what it's worth, she said, I don't think you tricked him. That was as close as she could get. Not apology. Acknowledgement. I didn't, I said. I know. Another pause. She exhaled slowly. I just didn't think he would choose you over me, she said. There it was again. Not confusion. Comparison. I didn't respond. Because that wasn't something I needed to resolve for her. She looked around the room again, then back at me. I don't know what to do with this, she said. Meaning the outcome, the loss, the shift. I understood that. But understanding doesn't require fixing. You don't have to do anything, I said. She frowned slightly. That's not how this works, she said. It is now. A pause. Longer this time. Then she nodded. Not agreement. None recognition. Small, but real. She didn't stay long. That was new. My mother had always known how to extend a moment, stretch it, control the rhythm of a room. This time she stood in the kitchen for a few minutes, looked at things that hadn't changed, said what she could say. Then she left. No attempt to linger, no final remark. Just a quiet, take care of the house. Not me, the house. I nodded. I will. After she closed the door, the silence didn't feel heavy. It felt settled. Like something had finally been placed where it belonged. That night I went back to the study. Sat in his chair. Not to remember him. To understand what he had actually given me. It wasn't the money. That was just the visible part. What he gave me was something simpler. A decision. He had seen the structure of our family clearly, seen who stayed, who performed, who managed, who showed up. And he chose accordingly. Not to punish. To place things correctly. I picked up the note again. You won't need permission for the things that matter. I read it slowly this time. Because I finally understood it. For most of my life I had waited. For approval, for confirmation, for someone to say you belong here. My mother never said it. Not directly. Not in a way that held. And without realizing it, I had carried that question into everything. Work, relationships, decisions. Always adjusting, always checking. Always asking. The courtroom didn't change that. The money didn't change that. What changed it was seeing that I didn't need the answer from her, or from anyone in that structure. The next morning I signed a set of documents. Routine things, trust administration, property details. My name at the bottom of each page. Clear. Unchallenged. I didn't hesitate. I didn't reread it twice. I signed. Not because I had to. Because I understood. Later that week I went back to work. Same office, same desk, same students. A girl sat across from me with a transcript in her hands. Her grades had slipped. Her financial aid was at risk. I just need someone to say I can still fix this, she said. I looked at her. You can, I said. A pause. But not because someone says it. She frowned slightly. Then how, she asked. I slid a form toward her. Because you decide what you're going to do next, I said. She nodded slowly. Not fully convinced. But listening. That was enough. When I got home that evening, the house felt different again. Not new, not unfamiliar. Just fully mine. Not because of ownership. Not because there was no longer a question attached to it. If you've ever been in a place where your place in it was always conditional, if you've ever learned to adjust yourself just enough to stay accepted, if you've ever mistaken silence for peace, you already know this. The moment you stop asking for permission, everything becomes clearer. Not easier, not lighter, just accurate. My mother didn't lose me in that courtroom. She lost the version of me that waited for her to decide who I was. And once that version is gone, there's nothing left to take.